All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I see people are very on time and prompt this morning, so thank you very much for that. We are very excited to introduce our panelists today, and Dr. King will introduce Professor Maldonado.
Okay, thank you so much for coming and being here with us today. We have a very special speaker, and I'm very enthusiastic to be able to introduce her and honored to do so. So, Dr. Carmen Maldonado-Vlaar received her PhD in behavioral neuroscience from Northeastern University and did her postdoctoral training in neuropharmacology at the Scripps Research Institute. She was one of the first Puerto Rican women to receive the Minority Fellowship in Neuroscience Award from the American Physiological Association. She's a research faculty member in the Department of Biology at the University of Puerto Rico, Piedras campus. She has successfully mentored hundreds of undergraduate and graduate students from underrepresented minority groups. Her scientific research is based on an ongoing interest to discover and characterize the potential therapeutic cellular targets important in the treatment of cocaine use disorder and other mental health disorders. Her scientific work was published in premier scientific journals and continuously funded by NIH. In her laboratory, she has mentored more than 150 Latinx students, and more than 70% were women. She served as the academic research advisor and institutional coordinator for several local and national organizations aimed at outstanding research training for underrepresented students in the STEM fields. She has extensive leadership experience by successfully holding several institutional positions, including the Dean of the Graduate Studies and Research. She led and established the first Center for Undergraduate Research and Learning at the University of Puerto Rico. Since its inception, it has impacted thousands of students and faculty with its initiatives. Currently, she's the principal investigator and co-PI of various institutional grants aimed at STEM training and mentoring, including an NSF Advance Award, which is a great award to get, and a Title V grant with significant impact on, I think that might have been the Title IX. We probably reproduced that differently, so please tell us about that. She was recognized by her peers as the first Puerto Rican neuroscientist to receive the 2021 Bernice Grafton Award for outstanding accomplishments in mentoring from the Society for Neuroscience. In 2024, she was awarded the first NIH institutional DEIA in biomedical and behavioral research prize for her outstanding work in the training of undergraduate students in the neuroscience at the University of Puerto Rico. In 2025, this year, she will serve as the chair of the Professional Development Committee of SFN, an award that I think is amazing. She's going to do a great job. A distinction for which is, of course, our largest neuroscience organization in the world. She was recently featured in the Atlas of Inspiring Hispanic Latinx Scientists, showcasing outstanding Latinx scientists across the USA. We want to give you a real warm welcome. Dr. Maldonado, we are going to be inspired. We know that this is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jean, Emmeline, and Pamela, and everyone that is here, and of course, Micaela, for helping with the coordination for this webinar. It is my honor to participate and be part of this series from this organization that I think is so impactful and that has a major goal of embracing the empowerment of women in neuroscience across the world. And so today I was asked to talk a little bit, and then I'll share my screen. Let me see, I practiced this with Micaela. Hold on.
So your screen is being shared. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
Now you see my screen, right?
It's fantastic.
Okay. So today I'll spend a couple of, I guess, a little bit more than half an hour, talk about the topic that is very close to me and my interest throughout my career, which is how we can address diversity within our field of neuroscience. And I want to say that the issue of diversity in neuroscience is an ongoing project. It's something that has been an important aspect of the development of our field once we understand how relevant it is to enhance the inclusion of all different, groups of our society in order to enhance knowledge and innovation in our field. So during this presentation, I will focus mostly on data that has been generated from the United States, but I think that a lot of the things that I'll be touching upon could have resonance in other countries through the ways that we address the presence of women and people from underserved communities in our environment and in the field of neuroscience. So it is a challenging road. Obviously, when we all started in this field that we are so passionate about, we understood that there were some milestones that we had to achieve, of course. I always remember my dear mentor, Dr. Ann Kelly, that she had in her, the entrance of her office door, she had a little sign that said, publish or perish. So you can imagine that with that, opening that door, I understood immediately that there were things that we as scientists had to embrace no matter what the circumstances. So it is important to address that not all of us have been able to have access and wonderful mentors and possibilities to achieve the highest potential. Some of us will go through a road of a lot of hardship, and I say this very, very seriously. And others will have, like in this picture that I show you here, some help, right? People that will be able to achieve things in a faster way than others. And this becomes very important when we address how certain groups in our wonderful community have endured some of these challenges, of course. And so we have to start from the premise that this is not a very diverse and inclusive community. Because, and then I think I'll be expressing reasons why it's not diverse, is because even though we have metrics that show the presence of women and underserved communities in the process of achieving goals, something happens through this path that makes the presence and the representation of us women and underserved communities less in places of power. And this will be quite evident when we talk about power dynamics, obviously. So I just bring up data and for you to get a little bit of what I'm talking about. For example, despite the fact that half of the doctorate students in neuroscience are women, only a quarter of them become tenured professors. So there's something happening during that situation of growing and becoming an academic that is making women not pursue or maintain the interest that started with your doctorate. And the same thing goes for other communities from the underrepresented minorities in the United States, that a lot of the students that enter the academic environment, unfortunately, start leaving this community and therefore eliminating or diminishing role models that could also eventually bring more to the field. So there's a very dynamic situation going on that has created this situation. Another thing, in addition to race, ethnicity, within the gender question is, for example, people coming from the LGBTQ plus community. A lot of these groups have had also major difficulties understanding that they belong to this community. A lot of devaluation, social exclusion, harassment they face through this process also have them leave the STEM field. And also, even though we are creating undergraduates and students that are interested in STEM, again, the process of achieving their milestones of a PhD or an academic position or non-academic position makes them vulnerable to leave the field. And finally, you know, on this community of the LGBTQ plus students, there's a decrease, at least of 7% that continue in careers in science. Now, what is the landscape right now of race, ethnicity, and gender or in this moment in the United States? This data comes from NSF in 2023, the metrics that NSF has. And as you can see in this graph, and this is a 10-year period from 2011 to 2021, and this is the STEM workforce, okay? It's not separated to neuroscience. But what we see is that for females, we have increased a little bit, 35% from 32% 10 years ago compared to males. And then with regards to race and ethnicity, what we see is interesting that percentage increases from 3 to 2% among underrepresented groups, at least in the Black or African American or Latino population. The increase has been modest, but interestingly enough, and this is something that may have us thinking about, and then there's less people that are considered white compared to 10 years ago. Disability status stays the same. So there's definitely a disparity, obviously, of people from underserved and women in the field of STEM in workforce. And another important thing that will give us an idea why things are being so uneven in this case is that even though underrepresented minorities in the United States represent 35% of the demographics, only 3% of African Americans and 5% of Hispanics receive R01 grants. And this was in 2022. That means R01, for those of you who don't know, is basically the benchmark of independent success. So in academia and in research. So therefore, the fact that there are so few of underrepresented groups that receive independent funding tells you again another hurdle and another challenge for our community to address in order to be competitive in scenarios where things basically judge you by the fact that you have these grants or not. And this is something important because not all institutions obviously see the holding of R01s as the only way for you to get your tenure or your promotion, etc. But most of them do. So this is a graph that shows you obviously how the disparity of the R01 grant holders in percentages versus Caucasian R01 grant holders is a dramatic difference. The other thing is that the grants that being favored usually are not supporting low risk research. Most of the grants get ushered toward experienced researcher over new ones. And also, the system is not blinded. So many studies have shown that controlling with other factors, grants are discussed, scored, and funded over men over women constantly. So even though women are in the workforce, we are representing a significant aspect of this scenario, we still don't get funded. And so if you don't get funded, we all know that means that you cannot advance in your career. So this is our structural barriers that are based on a culture that we'll talk about, that this culture within science that makes it even harder for our community to thrive. Now, I also want to give you a little bit more data on this is a paper that was recently published, and one of the things that I wanted to raise also is that, and it touches upon that experience, that process through the career path. So we know, based on data, that scientists tend to lose interest in pursuing a career in academic research during their training, and especially women and people of underrepresented minorities. And also, one of the other things that gets reported, that women scientists tend to have poor relationships with their mentors, lower first authorship publication rates, less confidence in their ability to become an independent researcher, and lower preference to be an autonomy compared to men scientists. And this data, as I said, was recently published. So if you combine all these factors, you have the perfect storm for having people leave the field. And therefore, I cannot stress enough the reasons why we need to address what is going on in that process, professional process, training process. That's why training grants, opportunities of growth are so crucial, to make sure that people that already come with disadvantage get to understand that they can achieve it, even though the system is in a way not so let's say supportive. The other thing is interesting as well within neuroscience, that from underrepresented groups, they tend to like more academic teaching and non-academic careers, which is perfectly fine. I mean, I'm all for it. The issue here is that then you have less of us in research-intensive scenarios that we can engage others. So that's become the unicorns, obviously. Sometimes we feel like we're the only ones in the field, or a few of us in the field. So that is something that we need to address. The low first authorship publication is very, very important to address, in particular for women. Women, it's so important that we understand that research and publishing our data, getting funded, is extremely important to have a foot in the door and a chair in the table. Otherwise, that will be something that will haunt us for the rest of our career. And finally, I wanted to bring you, with regards to publishing, even though we publish, there's a trend that, and this is something very, I find that terrible, is that usually men, scientists tend to quote more men than women. And even though 43% publication authors are women, the rate of female authors in 4 major journal neuroscience hovered to 35% in 2020. Because scientists often cite top journals, women are not there. So then our visibility also is hindered by that. So you see, there's a whole system here of checks and balances that in particular women in neuroscience need to understand and need to engage in participating in changing the way things address this. So what is power? And I bring this up because all this data I show you, you have to say, well, Carmen, well, why is this happening? Well, definitely has to do with power dynamics. And the current power model is structured so there is a coercive hierarchy and structures that are based on dominance. So there is we cannot, I mean, it's not a surprise to any of us here that, and I remember Dr. Collins, former NIH director, Francis Collins, that he refused to go to panels where there were all men, for example. He called it the manels. That's how he called them. I'm not going. And this is something that is important because he was intentional to make a message, to send a message of who has the power of science, and that everybody looks homogeneous there. And this is something that I think it was a first step, I think, from the standpoint of giving an example of what it is that makes us pause when we see these kinds of situations. I'll bring this back when we talk about women in science, in STEM in general. Where are we? Why are we so few at the level of making decisions? So to change that power, we need to transform the nature in our relationships with the way we are relating, no? And therefore, that percolates in academia because power and privilege in academia, there is a wheel of privilege, and I bring this up. So you see that increasing privilege is the way that you go in the center. So if you look at all these issues that creates our identity, this is something that Dr. Jean King has talked about also. These are our identities. So what makes us particularly so connected to what we are? And obviously the intersectionality, which here you can see, you find yourself there, no? And then you could see how much privilege and how much power you have. And this is something very important because if we are aware of our identities and how our identities relate to power, then that gives us an understanding of how we can engage in change, okay? And that's something very important that we need to address as a community. The other thing that we need to address is that racism is present in the history of neurosciences, and this is something that people usually don't talk about. But for years, intellectuals and people that were leaders in the field, that happened to be men as well, thought, for example, that Blacks were inferior. And this was something that was incorporated in the way science was structured. And I think this is one of the worst parts of our history in the field, obviously, because it perpetuated norms and ideas that are completely incorrect and obviously bigoted. So we have power dynamics, we have racism, and then we have also stereotypes, and also what is called, stereotype threat. Gender, ethnic, and racial stereotypes, all these things impact that process, that training, those experiences that's going to make these people that we all started the same and all of a sudden we're not ever going to achieve the same. So these gender, ethnic, and racial stereotypes are constantly present. They don't go away. They're very difficult to manage. And for women in particular and people from underserved communities, microaggressions, mansplaining, which is something that women face, several situations where, there's a man and then he wants to tell you what to say, or no, you don't understand, and things like that. And we all face that. But we have to be aware that this is happening and then raise our voices against them, of course. The other, obviously, is sexual harassment in academia, and that is embedded in models of master-apprentice that creates power imbalances. The cult of celebrity researcher creates cultures of impunity. Oh, this is such an important person. We cannot say that he has harassed me or anything like that. So that there are so many norms that we are dealing with. And also the field of research and training brings unique challenges of campus. People that do field work and women that do field work sometimes face sexual harassment in scenarios where the space doesn't provide you safety. And so all these things can trigger situations of harassment that are so demeaning and also completely turning off everybody and ushering them out of the field. So now, if you want to get worse, Now we have in the United States the Trump's executive order against DEI. And he called it Ending Radical and Wasteful Government, DEI Programs, and Preferring. And of course, I'm not going to go into, obviously, the nuts and bolts of this executive order, but I do want to raise that this has created a major change, not on the norm. Well, the idea is to change the norms, but to change the norms to a past that has created what I just presented to you. And so now we have a situation where our environment will harvest more scenarios of hindering training, making it more difficult for underserved and women to address the issues that I just raised. And so, and it goes against completely from evidence-based data that shows that diversity improves science. And that's the part that we should always support, and we should stand on that argument, because research have demonstrated that diversity is a driving force of team problem solving, of finding innovation. People think better when you have different perspectives to talk to. If, for example, there's a study that 3 universities found that groups that had more racial diversity and vocal minority opinions were better able to synthesize solutions to a more complex problem. So what the present government is going against scientific evidence that show, and also common sense, and this, in my opinion, when you have a very diverse group of people communicating and moving with a common principle of advancing knowledge and raising innovation to the point of the 21st century, I think that should not be deterred. That should be embraced and enhanced. Nevertheless, this is what we're facing. And that brings me to something that happened last year in 2024. That when the Nobel Prize in STEM winners were announced, there was no women awarded that year. And I just wanted to show you this picture. And this is since the inception of the Nobel laureates. And these are all the women that have received Nobel laureates, all. In STEM, I want to bring this up. Women in STEM. There has been women in other awards, in laureate awards, but not in STEM. And so what we're talking about is only 3% of the number of awards that have been given to women of all the discoveries and all the things. So I wrote this paper that I encourage, if you want to know a little bit about my argument on why this is important to discuss. It's just recently published at the Journal of Neuroscience. And so there still remains a gender and diversity gap at the Nobel laureates, which is the pinnacle of science achievement. And so this has to be discussed. And obviously with this backdrop of what I just mentioned about eliminating DEI, perhaps now for the next 10 years, we won't have women be given an award. And so these are some things I think is important. So on the remain of what I have for you today, I wanted to address then what to do about this and how can we address this. First, we have to understand the structural barriers. There's a hierarchical decision-making at every community, obviously, in particular in academia. And there's a resistance for leadership structures from the leadership. And I'm not going to generalize, because I know I have leadership women in this call that I know they face major challenges of trying to navigate things that they think is wrong and we need to change. So I want to raise that there is a lot of hierarchical decision making that sometimes women very few of us get to talk about. And I really salute for those of you who can say and make the difference. But then there's bureaucratic inertia, slow adoption of new policies. These policies become the law of the land, and then how we change these policies, no? Resource allocation, lack of funding and prioritizing the DEI initiatives. If we don't find the importance of DEI initiatives, then we don't fund them. And if we don't have funding, then these things don't move forward. And finally, tokenism. And this is a word I really hate, but at the same time it happens. When I've been in scenarios where you have to, for example, evaluate grants where they say, well, but we have 1% of women, or we hire one woman and one African American, and then all of a sudden that is the end. We completed our quota. And I think that's really demeaning of the process. I think that also takes them away of what is it that we are really there for. And so these things are, these structural barriers are something that we need to address as a community. You know? And then changing that mindset, okay, that also takes time. We know there's these barriers, the policy, the norms, the systems that hinder change. Then we have institutions that have their own mindset, that collective attitudes shaping decision making, and how these factors impact DEI accomplishment of women scientists, accomplishment of African American, accomplishment of Hispanic scientists, how these mindsets and cultural structures impact our growth, and why we have the numbers I started with, okay? So these are very important matters. So in order to see how we can fix this, we need to look at organizational culture. And what is the concept of organizational culture? And I bring this, I am not a special, I mean, this is not my expertise, but I've been interacting with wonderful colleagues from the School of Business and Management, and they really know about organizational culture. And they said to me that organizational culture is a complex construct that has been employed to explain the behavior of people in different social contexts. So imagine the context of a university, okay? So what happens in the university, the behavior of this community reflects the basic assumptions or principles that a group of persons share and make them comfortable in specific situations. And the theories behind this is SHINE. And I'll bring this theory of SHINE of organizational culture because I think it's important for us to address it from the standpoint, not only from an institution standpoint, but also from a community standpoint. And we decided this is based on the iceberg metaphor. You know, the iceberg, you see the tip of the iceberg, but beyond, underneath water, there's the biggest part of the iceberg, no? So the visible part are called the artifacts, which include the policies, the procedures, human resource management, the norms, the ethics, the values, and the assumptions. For example, men fulfilling research, high-level academic and administrative roles where women teaching and lower-level management. These are the things that are the cultural levels. And then the invisible part are the shared values and the shared assumptions. So you have the visible ones and the invisible ones. And these things are important because based on SHINE, organizational culture, which is a very interesting approach, he talks about secondary socialization process, that what basically happens is that this community gets together and this is how things run in this community, and whoever comes to this community, whoever wants to be part, whoever wants to engage in this community will be taught that this is how the thing works here. This is how our culture is. You have to comply to that. You have to deal with that if you want to be part of us. So this is a very important concept because once the culture is constructed, it gets perpetuated by the secondary socialization, and then it gets really strong and has tenacity. And so to change that is very difficult, okay? And so what can we do? And this, I always show this little image here, and I hope, I imagine a lot of us can relate. I certainly relate to this woman here. So the question is, what's the matter? It's the same distance. No, it's not. Perhaps metrically wise, but look at the difference, obviously. So what can we do? I mean, we have to support, and I talk about targets, victims, and survivors. Perhaps when we see it from the standpoint of when you are facing all these challenges, but in a organization, a culture organization is how you you face a chair of your department and says, well, this is how we run things, and we've been doing this for the last 20 years, and this is how you should achieve X, Y, and Z. And you say, well, that doesn't make sense to me. But then, well, that's how it is. So what are you going to do? Well, change it. And I said, well, do you have power to change it? You see? And so we have to encourage a dialogue. He cannot be top-bottom approach. We have to mentor our communities, create independent funding, incentivize on ethical and professional behavior, demand accountability, commit to creating just, equitable, and respectful spaces. If we don't do that, especially in this environment, it's going to get harder. So we have organizations already that really embrace diversity and really are here to create a community that cherish that, And I give you examples of online and things that now are available for you to, be part of. Of course, the World Women in Neuroscience is one of them. Black in Neuro is a beautiful project that I think it has been done. The founder is a former Spines alum, which is something that I'm very proud of. We have Neuroboricuas. This is also a community here in Puerto Rico about neuroscientists. And we have stories of women in neuroscience. I don't know if you know of this effort. And this was also originated by a former student of mine, Nancy Padilla, that is a professor at University of Florida, Gainesville. And then there is this Bias Watch Neuro. You guys should check it out, because this is a website where they are measuring or detecting all these activities where men are the only ones presenting. It's very interesting. You should if you are interested in searching for that kind of thing. But these are places where it will be a reservoir of belonging and making yourself part of something that is important. And so, like Jean mentioned, I'm part of the NSF Advanced that I participated in 2 of them. Unfortunately, as you may know, NSF Advanced has been terminated or stopped by the federal government because they consider this initiative part of the DEI that Trump has thought to eliminate. So right now, all NSF advances are in jeopardy, even though our grant, they have told us that we won't have a no-cost extension, even though it's supposed to be automatic. There's going to be, we are waiting for it to say no. But I want to bring, even though we have these difficulties, I think that we were able to achieve some wonderful events that I wanted to share with you to show you how, from the institutional standpoint, you can make a difference. I was part of this other NSF Advanced, the Thrive Partnership, was an effort to identify chairs of biology department throughout the U.S. that were interested in improving the presence of Latinas in their department. And so this was originated at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. And I was one of the selected chairs at the time when I was the chair of the department. And then this is the one that was originated in our university called is an advanced catalyst, which is one of the mechanisms of advance, and is the Virtual Observatory of Culture for Equity in Academia, VOCEA, at our institution. So the overall of our advanced catalyst grant is to conduct a critical assessment of the components of our institution organizational culture and how this prevents an effective accounting of women in academia, including their efforts and contributions in STEM. So basically, for the UT Rio Grande Valley, I was involved in enhancing employee recognition, in particular women scientists in Rio Piedras. And in the VOCEA, I'm focusing on organizational functioning. And I have to say it has been a wonderful experience, and we have achieved several things. I won't be able to tell you all of them because my time is running out. But we have to say that from the organizational culture perspective, counting women, it's good to have that data, but this is not the only thing that you should be looking at numbers. You should be looking at what are they doing with the women that are represented in your community. What is it that we need to do as an institution to really create a culture that embraces women in science in a way that they're supported, recognized, etc. So in the VOCEA grant, we focus on space. So we do assessment of working spaces, office and lab space conditions. We looked at analysis of institutional norms and policies. So we examine what are the words, the bylaws, certification. Institutions write all these certifications and letters and things. Okay, one of our top priorities to look at how we express ourselves as a community. And finally, safe spaces where we gather and create sense of community. We have different venues for that. So that has been quite successful. I'm very happy to report. So the mindset, like I said, historical and cultural inertia, resistance to accountability, metrics, competing priorities, all these are necessary to address them in order to change the mindset of the community. In our institution, when we did the study on the VOCEA, these are the list of what our community said that was facing our challenges as an institution. Financial instability, this is more focused on my institution. Just to let you know that all these things that are listed impact academic women in STEM in our institution. So lack of uniformity in data and technology, outdated regulatory structures, campus doesn't collect data on sexual orientation or disability, fragmented data, silos, the culture of silos, everybody's in groups, no one connects to each other. All these things impact our growth. So I will finish with effective strategies to enhance cultural capital and foster meaningful connections. I'm very ambitious on this one, but I think that it's just to give you an idea of what I through my journey, have understand that this will be helpful for us to address. So definitely cultivate inclusive excellence. I cannot stress this more. We have to recognize the challenges and the strengths that our community faces. We have to incorporate culturally responsive mentoring strategies across the board. We have to ensure that the research experience reflects diverse perspectives. We have to foster an open dialogue where students, faculty, or you can adapt to our community, share ideas and experiences. We have to strive to create spaces where everybody feels welcome and respected. We have to promote a research with a purpose philosophy, and this is something that comes from a paper we recently published about research with a purpose philosophy, which is a very interesting concept that if we have time, we can talk about. And finally, embrace diversity. I cannot stress one. I mean, I'll die saying this, even though the government says otherwise. Diversity strengthens culture and personal capital for each mentee or each individual that brings STEM to the field. So from our community, these are recommendations that we have gathered through the OSEA grant. And most of them is something that was represented in the previous slide, but this is, I wanted to show you data-based, how we implemented this and how people responded. That included, of course, sense of community, data unification, established metrics that measure diversity, induction and support of new staff, recognize employee, etc. So I will end with this slide that says, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I really want to encourage everyone that despite whatever comes, and this is I have to say that what we're facing today is not so different from what we would have faced 25 years, 50 years ago. Every moment in our history, we will be faced with challenges. But the point of the matter is that we have to follow our values and follow what we think is right. And I think our community, the neuroscience community, can achieve major milestones if we embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll finish with that. Thank you.